Hi, my name is Lyric, and today we're going to be continuing the conspiracy theory iceberg by Wendigoon. We're going to react to the entirety of the fifth layer today, both parts 1 and 2, so it's going to be a long video. I expect it to be over an hour long, like the last one was. So yeah, get some popcorn, maybe watch this in the background or something because it's so long. But yeah, we're going to try to add some commentary here. We're on to the fifth part out of 10. So yeah, if you haven't watched the first 4 parts, make sure to watch those, make sure to subscribe and like, because it takes less time for me to say the words, it takes more time for me to say the words subscribe and like than it takes you to actually subscribe and like, yeah. And also, who's watching the entire conspiracy theory iceberg as a reaction? I haven't seen anyone do it other than me, so let's go.
Everyone,
can't wait too much time because it's gonna be long.
Two quick things I want to mention before we get started. First of all, some people have been asking in the comment section of some of these why I'm not going into specific events of debunking, because I come across a lot of it while I'm researching this stuff.
That makes it lame.
I kind of just don't want to ruin the fun. Like,
yeah.
I'm here to present the theories because I think they're cool and interesting, and if with everyone I get into, well, here's what that's probably not true, then
yeah, that's just lame.
Magic out of it. However, a lot of people have been discussing them in the comments and talking about them, and I think that's great. And
yeah,
that's awesome.
Look more into it in your own time.
Sometimes, but I just don't want to do it in the video to not, like I said, ruin the fun for anyone. Also,
right.
As someone pointed out about a week ago, I was talking about how insane it was that I was at 1,000 subscribers, and now I'm at like 2,600, and I can't believe it. Like, the growth has been crazy. Like, over
you made it now, man. You made it now.
Compared to how I was doing last month, and it's all thanks to you guys. It really does mean the most. I know I
love Wendigoon, man.
Thank you for watching, but
great YouTuber.
I really do mean it. Thank you for watching, and I'm going to keep doing this. Actually, there is one more thing I forgot to mention. A lot of people have been asking me in the comments like what I'm going to do when the iceberg's over. For one, I already do like different movie reviews and stuff like that on this channel. But as far as this kind of content goes, there are several other icebergs to look over. Not just conspiracies, but like lost media and horror movies and stuff like that. There's true crime stuff, and whatever I get into, I promise it's just going to be the cool and the bizarre. So
yeah,
there's definitely more stuff I want to do that I will do. So this iceberg won't be the end of it. It's fun, but it won't be the end of it. Without further ado, we will go ahead and get into it.
Man.
As I mentioned before, thank you for watching. Tier 5 is the Animaster, and the description reads, "This kind of knowledge is often hidden in plain sight or can be found in very ancient texts after meticulous research that may take dozens of years. From this point on, sane people have a hard time even understanding most of these concepts. The journey starts here."
Let's go, man.
Magic of the State, which was a novel written by Michael Taussig. From all the descriptions and summaries I read about the book, it's essentially about this spirit that acts as a queen that goes to this mountain and creates this whole sort of like spiritual realm for people to inhabit in, but that doesn't really matter, because where the conspiracy comes in is the entire idea that this book is a metaphor for the state and governments, and in other words, this whole illusion of magic that this spirit queen creates is similar to how we all simply fall in line with the illusion of the state, and that perceived impermanence of the state is the magic of the state. Crank incident refers to the disappearance of the third Crank movie starring Jason Statham. For those that don't know, Crank is famous for being over the top and insane and violent and edgy, and in a good way. It's like a fun action movie. However, there are 2 of them, but the third one just all of a sudden, as soon as production was over, disappeared. The online story is that this is because like social justice warriors got onto it, because women were depicted very poorly throughout the movies. However, the true version, as the conspiracy states, is that the movie was about Jason Statham exposing Hollywood satanic cults and elitist satanic cults, and him going on a rampage through that, and because of the content of it, that's the real reason that the movie got canned. Sycamore Knoll isn't.
There's been stuff like that, I'm pretty sure. Didn't like the government get mad at like what movie was it that had Area 51 in it? It was like an alien movie. They got Alien 51 in it, and they got really mad. They tried to delete the movie, but it didn't work. But if it was like, because it's a Hollywood movie, they're making like the same thing happens to Hollywood. I can see them trying to get rid of it.
In reference to an underground plateau located 6 miles off the coast of Malibu, California, about 2,000 feet underwater, and so predominant that it can even be seen from Google Earth. There is this predominant plateau that sticks up out of the ground, leaving people to think it's an underwater base, even that of extraterrestrial origin. In 95,
It does look
people
hella
started
suspicious, to be
point
fair.
at it and figure out it was there, and there was a lot of research happening around it at the time, and it turns out that this had been kept secret for nearly 40 years. Reaction
Why?
was dry.
Why was it being kept secret? That's suspicious.
Is in reference to a theory in physics of the propellantless motor, which, if you're familiar with the movie Interstellar, is the ship
my
at
gummy.
the end that manages to move off of its own motion, so without needing any fuel source. And theoretically, it could lead to a forever lasting engine that does not require fuel. Theories range on how this could be accomplished. Actually, another thing mentioned later in this episode is a thought process that could lead to a propellantless motor. Most often it has to do with gravity, and the idea that if you can make gravity work in a centrifugal motion,
Yeah,
it
centrifugal
can
force.
be used as a propellant. Enneagram is something that you may be familiar with, as it is a very popular online test that you can take that determines your personality type on a series of numbers 1 through 9, so there are 9 different personality types that you could be.
Alright.
However, the roots of this are a bit more deep than you may think. The origins of Enneagram are traced back to esoteric and mysticism.
Nice.
And it's the idea that it's not just your personality type being determined, but it is the manner by which you can achieve enlightenment. So through this personality test that you can take, you can figure out how to find your higher self. Commentary Earth has 2 real theories, the first of which, and the more common one, being that the Earth only exists in the form that it does, or is only possible to exist because of comets. Both the
Kinda
crust
true.
exist as fertile grounds because of comets that hit it however many million years ago.
Right.
Or the idea that as comets pass by the Earth, they deliver the necessary nutrients and trace elements that we need in our ecosystem to continue to survive. The other theory is that Earth itself was originally a comet of another system, and the high temperatures led to gas exposure, which led to the conditions needed to create our now planet.
That's not
Rockmen, or
unbelievable
the
at all.
rock apes, are in reference to a group of
Rockmen.
Sasquatch-like creatures that were seen by American GIs while in Vietnam. Batututs, as they were called by locals, were so predominant in the area that one mountain that American GIs were stationed on was known as Monkey Mountain, because every patrol that went out came back reporting that they had seen the Rockmen. It was so predominant that in 1974, after the war was over, an NVA general led an entire expeditionary force back into the combat zone that they fought Americans in Vietnam, just to see if they could discover these creatures. And if you're curious about what they would do, they would see people, begin throwing stones at them, and then run away.
Nice.
Some stories even saying that they threw back grenades that the Americans had thrown. Despite this, none were ever caught or no bodies were ever found, and it's believed that they lived in the caves and rat tunnels in the Vietnam combat zones. Cap Dwa is the name given to the skeleton of an Argentinian giant, which has been
Giants.
throughout history. Not only that, but this 12-foot tall skeleton has 2 heads. And the story goes that in 1673, Spaniards had captured it in Argentina and were bringing it back to Spain. They had it tied to the mast of the ship, to which the giant broke loose, killed 4 sailors, and was eventually killed by the crew, to which the body was brought back and hosted in museums and
Great.
circuses and things such as. Also, as far as a deeper
Giants.
dive is concerned, there's absolutely going to be one about giants and Agartha and that whole sort of
He
canon
still
of
hasn't made one. I want to
philosophy.
see a video on that,
I
man.
just haven't decided if I want to do them together or separate yet. But there will be one, trust me. So I come to you now with another shame, such as I had with Nexus 7. Protodytes, the word proto means before or original, and dite means small or mite. So I imagine it has something to do with microscopics or biotech, like nanotechnology or something such as, but
Something such as?
Protodyte is also the name of something from the Bionicle lore. And I'm not kidding. So everything I researched just led to that, and I promise I tried, but I could not find anything. So like Nexus 7, this is my second failure. That if one of you can mention in the comments to find out for the corrections video, please do.
The theory is actually
But,
that Bionicle
come
lore
to
is
you
true.
Shameful. So sorry.
It's my
about
theory.
that. Cat Nuns is in reference to a group of nuns who were living
There's a monastery
in a
right here.
monastery in the Middle Ages of France, who one day, for seemingly no reason, one of the nuns meowed to another, to which that nun meowed back. And then they went and did it to another one, and it got to the point where the entire monastery exclusively communicated through meows.
In the words in the Great Salmonella, everybody gangsta till the nuns start meowing.
Keep in mind, these nuns
I love Salmonella, bro. They were meowing more than a group of communist trading card enthusiasts.
were also interacting with people of the town. And
Exchanging
anytime they
mail
would
to a
come
group of
out
communist trading
to
card
buy
enthusiasts.
supplies or whatever, they would meow to the people there too. It got to be such a problem that the town hired the army to come in and threaten to whip the nuns to death if they didn't stop meowing. And even then, it took some time. This is often chalked up to a case of mass hysteria, as was the dancing plague that I mentioned in the last tier. However, it's still odd that this happened at all. Max Spires was a famous conspiracy theorist from England who claimed that at a young age he was kidnapped to be a part of a government super soldier program, to which he then escaped and became dedicated to outing the British government, which is why labels like conspiracy theorist were thrown on him so often. He spoke at several TED Talks and different conferences about being weary of one's own government, and led people on ideas such as investigating more into whatever the news propagates and things like that. That was until he went to visit his friend in Switzerland, and then while sitting on the couch began throwing up a black liquid and died in his friend's home.
You know, that's not suspicious at all. You know, you're just like trying to expose the government, and then you go to your friend's house and you just start throwing up black liquid. You know, that's not suspicious at all, you know, and then die.
The cause of death to this day is still weird, and a day before he died, he texted his mom that he was onto something, and if anything happens to him, to investigate. Not only that, but his fiance came out afterwards and said at the conference he was giving the next day, he was going to expose several elites that he had found connections to. And then he dies from throwing up
black liquid,
black goo. So
great.
I'm sure those aren't connected at all.
Not suspicious at all.
Is in reference to an event that happened at
Oasis.
We got an ad, guys. Make sure to subscribe so we can get these ads off.
American Embassy in Cuba in August of 2017. Several US and Canadian embassy members all of a sudden began feeling these intense pains in their heads where they were unable to think or function, to which they all evacuated the embassy, and it turns out they all suffered severe brain damage. While there was no direct source of this issue, it's believed that acoustic attacks were the culprit, or essentially low frequency or unperceivable attacks of sonic vibrations or sound that lead you to pain or passing out. And we know this technology exists because it's actually used in riot control techniques. This was such a big deal that it led to the term Havana Syndrome, which is in reference to, again, these acoustic attacks. Bloodletting magic is exactly what it says. The idea that satanic or Wiccan rituals that are performed whenever they use blood are more effective than they naturally are. And you can add a layer to that and say the reason that people go disappearing in these elitist rings and things like that is because they need the blood for whatever spells they perform.
Oh,
Google
great.
Earth's black zones is exactly what it says. There are entire regions on Google Earth that
Can't
are
see.
either blurred or completely blacked out. Some of these kind of make sense, like a lot of North Korea's military stuff is blacked out in order to not, you know, cause a panic over that. However, some are much more odd, such as Anthrax Island, Roswell, New Mexico, and the Garden of Gethsemane. So yeah, make of that what you will. Crowdfunded assassination is again exactly what it says. The
Anthrax Island sounds like just the worst place to be.
Idea being that whenever
something about it is Anthrax Island,
such as a president or world leader who is wanting to be assassinated, obviously one person can't fund it, but on the deep web there's these pots that people throw money into, and when it reaches a certain amount, an assassin is hired to take that person out. And of course the conspiracy goes on to say this is all done through crypto, it's completely untraceable, done with aliases, and it leads to the idea that thousands, if not tens of thousands of people contribute towards these group killings. Serpent seed is another belief in the now multiple times mentioned Gnostic religion. The belief essentially says that in the Garden of Eden, whenever Satan appeared to Eve in the form of a serpent, that he mated with her and the resulting child was Cain. The idea being that as sin entered the world, and of course Cain was the first murderer, it all came from this literal seed of the devil. Panopticon is an architectural design that was theorized by Jeremy Bentham in the 18th century. The idea for it being, it was supposed to be designed as a prison in which every single cell member could be watched from one position by one guard in a chair. However, the catch to it was the cells were built in such a way that the prisoners could not tell at what time they were being watched. They just know that there was a potential that they could be watched, and therefore you could control a much larger population with a much smaller group of people. Bantham then went on to say this could be applied to hospitals, schools, other education centers, and obviously it's now used as an analogy to talk about the state and totalitarianism in which the few govern the many. The Inunaki village is a story that goes like this. In Japan during the Edo period that lasted from 1603 to 1868, there was a village in the mountains that decided they did not want to be a part of the Japanese government and decided to become secluded to themselves. It was then figured out by outsiders that this was done in order to practice the occult, such as blood rituals and sacrifices and things such as, and this eventually led to an incident in which someone in the town slaughtered 33 people during one of these rituals. Because of this, the Japanese government at the time decided to take the village off of every map and simply cut off all roads and seclude it to itself. Now, when walking up the Inunaki mountain, there is a sign that can be seen off the road which reads, "Japanese regulations and constitutions do not apply here."
That's
What's
really
even
creepy.
creepier about this village, more than any just standard haunted ghost town, is the theory says that these people are still alive, and after hundreds of years of inbreeding and demonic practice, they've become these subhuman monsters that kill and cannibalize anyone that walks up the mountain alone. It also hurts my feelings that Suicide Forest gets as much attention as it does, when I think stuff like this is way cooler. Prana Release has to do with prana, which is a popular subject of Eastern philosophy theory. Prana is, as far as I can equate it to, sort of a life force, which people can adopt and take on themselves.
Brandon Rogers.
And express in different ways. Kind of like aura,
Take its goddamn
or
life
chi
force.
energy, if you're familiar with those concepts. Several theories that I found say that upon death, all of the prana that is stored in the body is released. And this is sort of what some philosophies consider to be a soul, but it goes a step forward in saying that those around you at your time of death can absorb that prana and therefore be taking in part of your essence. 24-hour year could be in reference to two separate things. One of them could be the actual idea that every 24 hours we experience a full rotation around the sun, and that the Earth's rotation is baloney. Other theory being that there is supposedly, according to legend, a 24-hour time slot that is missing from our historical record, which can be explained using the books of Isaiah and Joshua in the Old Testament of the Bible, in which God stopped the earth for a total of 24 hours during a battle Joshua had and a prayer that Isaiah had. Not sure which one this is referring to, so there's both.
Well, that one's really interesting. I want to know more about that.
List is exactly what it says. There are certain people who corporations have a problem with, because even if they compete with each other on the market, they definitely have an understanding with each other when it comes to the deep state. Therefore, there are certain people that they want dead. Max Spies, which I mentioned earlier, would absolutely be an example of that. The Man from Earth was a book written in 1983 by Gordon R. Dixon. The concept of this book was later adapted into a Star Trek episode by Jerome Bixby, and then later a movie by the same name. The plot of the story is that a man who is 12,000 years old tells his colleagues about his entire experience living through the life of Christ and the rise of humanity and Babylon and all the empires falling to the present day. The theory in this is that the original author, George R. Dixon, actually is either this man himself or experiencing it, and theories range with his predictions of history and his discrepancies that have happened throughout history. But pretty much the idea that Gordon used this book
as a fun
as
theory
to sort of confess.
It's a really fun theory. I like that.
Of his true nature. Interdimensional Bigfoot's exactly what it says. Those familiar with parallel
that
universes
picture
will also be familiar with the idea of portals, the idea that there could be beings that could
now you're thinking with portals, man.
transport between dimension to another, which would explain why something like Bigfoot has never been seen. There are also symptoms that occur with these interdimensional portals, such as fauna changing and certain acoustic vibrations in the air. And looking at throughout history, this can not only explain Bigfoot sightings, but also things such as Mothman's appearance and other various cryptids, saying that maybe they're not just creatures like animals as we think of them,
interdimensionals,
like higher order interdimensional beings. Organic black helicopters,
interdimensional Bigfoot, great.
One of which being the idea that there are these black helicopters that can be seen passing over, especially the United States very often, that don't have any identity markings of what country of origin they belong to. They normally fly in groups, and they never have any distinguishable pilots. The idea of this being that this is an alien creature or some kind of cloaking mechanism. Especially
Probably use the
since
U.S.
these are
government
normally
doing some
cited around
shady
the time
shit,
of UFO
to be honest.
appearances. The other theory being there are these microscopic nanobots that look like helicopters that are injected into people's bloodstreams, and at any moment will cause people to turn into a helicopter. Moving on. Manatees are humans. Are
I believe that one. I
themselves,
believe that
the
one.
main
100%.
idea being
I got an ad. I definitely believe the second one, the helicopter one. 100%. 100%. Alright.
that back in history at some point there's a branching off point between humans and manatees, and that's why there are similar features between the two. However, the further statement of this is that manatees are either the descendants of some Atlantean sea people or even cursed sailors who were lost at sea and became so accustomed to it that their bodies were transformed through magic and witchcraft into manatees.
That's cool.
The John Titor project
I like
was
that
a
one.
reference to forum posts that took
Time
place
Traveler,
between
another one.
2000 and 2001. In these, a man who said his name was John Titor said he was from the year 2036 and he had come back in time to retrieve an old computer that can properly do simple code in order to fix a problem in the modern day. Some believe this to be the now recognized Unix 2038 problem, which would oddly make sense for someone in 2000 to say, claiming to be a time traveler. From that, John Titor answered several questions, saying that there would be a civil war in the United States, a brief but deadly World War III, and would eventually lead to a new prosperous age of technology and industrialization. Russian crime dungeons was hard to find any information on. I think this is referring to gulags, which for those who don't know is essentially these Russian prisons or dungeons in which political prisoners most often are thrown in indefinitely and sort of left to fend for themselves in order to survive. So it's sort of like literally throwing people into a hole so that they're not a problem to you anymore. Universal throwing people into a hole so that they're not a problem to you anymore. Universal communion is a concept in predominantly Catholicism that communion can be taken by everyone of every religion. They don't necessarily have to be Catholic. However, I do have to mention that in research for this, even on Catholic sites, I found several mentions of the exact phrase New World Order of Christianity and all religions coming together. So I'm guessing this is an idea amongst elitists that all religions can be combined into one through the idea of universal communion. There are no force is actually a
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Fan of, even if I don't necessarily believe it. It's the idea that every forest as we know it is not a forest and simply the small sprouts or stems of what are really trees. Well, then what are really trees? All the mountains that we see, from mountain ranges to plateaus.
I like this theory. I've seen this before. I think it's I don't like believe it, but I think it's really like a cool way to look at the world.
Are the shaved off tops of trees, and the trees that grow up from them are just sort of like the grass sprouting out from its cracks. It gives this beautiful idea that the world used to be a giant magnificent forest and that something caused all of that to be destroyed. The theory goes on to say that rocks as we know them are simply the pebbles of what used to be rocks, and again this whole idea that the earth used to be this giant utopia that's
giant.
Asian blood types is in reference to the idea that in Asian culture, specifically Korean culture, blood types are often used as a basis to determine one's personality. From everything I read on this, it's kind of similar to how in the United States people base personalities, or some people base personalities off of their astrological sign. So this is sort of like the Asian equivalent of that. Ghost condensate is kind of difficult to explain. This is the theory that I mentioned earlier when talking about the reactionless drive. I'm going to try to quickly summarize. So from my understanding, a ghost in a physics spectrum is a number or factor that cannot be determined and sort of appears on its own. So it is like the in-between variable whenever you're trying to figure out how a system works. A ghost condensate would be a byproduct of that that contributes a little more energy than originally thought because of factors we can't take into account. The theory with ghost condensate is that if it is harnessed correctly, this little bit of power can be recycled on itself over and over and over and eventually create a reactionless drive. See, what do y'all need college for when you got me? Breatharianism.
Hey man, who needs college of Wendigoon, man?
Very,
Who
very
needs to?
closely related to Ainedia, which is sort of a mystic Eastern religion, and it all has to do with prana, which I mentioned earlier. The idea of breatharianism being that if someone balances their ki right and properly figures out how to withstand their own body's state of homeostasis, they can survive with no food and in some cases even no water. There's people who've done very in-depth videos on it, better than I can, but essentially there have been people who have gone months at a time under surveillance without eating or drinking, while at the same time there have been total fakes who have said they haven't ate in years, and then someone finds a picture of them at Thanksgiving eating. So yeah, it goes both ways. Famously, breatharianism is known as a pseudoscience because several people who have tried a diet of nothing have died,
Makes sense.
non-surprisingly, and obviously casted doubt onto this entire philosophy. Memphis Rap is a brand of rap that originates from Memphis. The original name for most of this is horrorcore, as a lot of the music is composed of noises, has lyrics that discuss murder and suicide and other heavy concepts. It gives an overall feeling of creepy, with most people who listen to it describing that they feel like they're not supposed to be doing it. The 3-6 Mafia, which is now a famous rap group, and if you think about the name 3-6 or 666 Mafia, was one of the pioneers of this genre, with their original tracks having lyrics such as "the daughter of the devil" and talking of Satanism and rituals and things such as. Idea being
and things such as
is either a confession of demonic events or sort of a.
It's like the rap version of black metal.
Your relief map, or as it's also known, the map of the creator, is a reference to a white stone slab that was found in 1995. While doing research in the Ural Mountains, a Russian researcher discovered these texts from the 18th century that said there were several stone slabs that were used as maps of the area. The researchers then went out to try to discover whatever the stone slab was and came upon a small village in the Ural Mountains that brought forward one of the slabs. On the stone slab was a perfect one-to-one replica of the valley they were in, but not only that, it had perfectly mapped out irrigation systems, dams, and other large-scale structures that could not have been built at the time the stone was dated, which was anywhere from 8,000 to 120 million years old. Not only that, but the edges of the map, from what it looks like, have been cut off, implying that it is a piece of a bigger structure. This is, as you could imagine, one of the
really cool.
used when talking about ancient aliens. Bitcoins created by banks is, again, exactly what it says. The idea that banks realized that currency was dying out and there therefore needed to be a new currency, so they developed the subversive currency to banks while they secretly own it and are just perpetuating the cycle they were already on. One of the main theories behind this is that
surprised by this.
Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto,
has never been discovered.
An alias, and the man has never been discovered.
Right.
With the idea being that big banking groups simply made this fake alias in order to create their own enemy, so they can play both sides. Psychotropic warfare is in reference
to
times that drugs such as LSD or shrooms have been implanted into water supplies or food supplies, in order to mentally stunt the enemy. Not only enemies in the traditional sense, but a lot of this can be traced back to in the 60s and 70s, after MK Ultra, whenever the government was putting acid into impoverished area water supplies to simply see what would happen, or to quell dissonance in the people of those areas. Basically the idea that you can poison the minds of whoever you're up against. New chronologies and history denials can go very deep, but sort of to shorten it, it's just the idea that there are now new theories that entire 100-year periods of history are either made up.
There's the theory that the entire Middle Ages are just made up,
or simply filled in, such as there's an idea that Egypt, as it's historically believed, is 300 years older than it actually was, so therefore that's 300 years of history that's just been entirely fabricated. A lot of this relates to biblical history, which is just using the Bible as the basis for history, and the idea that there are a few year discrepancies that exist between the two, so using the Bible as a hardcore basis for it leads to some miscommunications between how long things really existed, which would mean that the Earth isn't exactly as old, or at least human history isn't as old as we theorize it to be. China's real population is in reference to the fact that China now
This one's really
reports
interesting.
about 1.4
I'd like to
billion
look into this
people
more.
populace. However, using things such as TV broadcasting and train and vehicle amounts and other things such as which can be used to measure the amount of a population, it puts the country at about 500 million. Now, what that means is that there are definitely people who would not communicate in ways like trains or TV or cell phone, so therefore it's more than 500 million. However, at the same time, there's absolutely no way to know how many people there actually are if they have no way of being seen through government registries. That would mean that China is artificially inflating its numbers.
I would say there's more evidence. I would say there's more evidence to this one.
In order to just seem like a bigger world power, and more specifically to have a higher population than India.
This one's very interesting.
Historically, they do not have a good time with. So basically, China fluffing the numbers by a lot in order to seem more important than they are. Since China is kind of one of the last bastions of the entire idea that the government is always right in the modern world,
wouldn't be surprised.
I could definitely see that, and it does make sense. And that will do it for the first part of Tier 5.
Alright, so that's part 1 of Tier 5, and yeah, let's go into part 2. Hi! We're back.
Welcome to Tier 5, Part 2 of the Iceberg. Sorry for the bit of the hiatus.
Part 2, man.
Some were concerned, and no, I'm not dead. With the holidays, I've been doing a lot of traveling, seeing family, stuff like that.
The thing about Wendigoon, he covers so many conspiracy theories that if he ever gets murdered by the government, we're not going to know which conspiracy theory he was murdered for.
But now I am back in the command center and ready to get this through.
The command center.
So I hope you enjoy, and as always,
like that.
Thank you for watching. Mental problems theory is one of those that's kind of vague and can have different meanings. Given the context for the rest of the items on this tier, I believe it's referring to the theory that those with mental issues are not actually suffering deficiencies, they are instead suffering from advanced physiology, and that whatever they're experiencing is the newfound roots of the next step in human evolution. So basically, those who experience mental illness are just using an advanced physiology than the rest of us. Highway trolls is in reference to the phenomenon that occurs whenever you're riding alone on the highway at night and begin to see
like
things
sociopathy?
either running off the road or just out of view of your headlights. What's interesting about this specific phenomenon,
I like that. That's a cool. That's a cool like creepypasta thing.
Report seeing the same things in the same areas, but it's not like a cryptid or Bigfoot as you traditionally think. Instead, it's these shared hallucinations that occur on dark roads at night.
That's cool.
Leading people to believe that while this may be a creature, it may also be a sort of fourth dimensional being that is only expressed during these sort of twilight moments. OOO, or object-oriented ontology, as it's called, is in reference to a concept in metaphysics that says while we as humans constantly think of our existence in a sort of selfish way, that the natural world has to revolve around our sense of perception, that's not necessarily the case. And some things that we can't explain will never be explained because the universe doesn't conform to our understanding. If that makes sense. Also, I just want to mention this now. Putting this on the iceberg as OOO made this near impossible to find, so whoever made this, thanks, appreciate it. Also, while I'm off topic, normally what I do whenever researching for these things is I will find some new board on 4chan or Reddit or something like that and just follow along until someone links like an article or an old forum page to try to find out information on some of these things. But it's gotten to the point that, for example, on 4chan, when trying to look this up, someone said, oh, don't worry, this guy right here, he'll cover it in his next video. So I go to the link and it's me, which is really cool and it means a lot. And it's so wild to think.
Hold up, we'll trade this. Start digging now. This guy is reviewing the chart. Thank you guys. I found a YouTuber that does a review all the topics here. Pretty comfy. Yeah, Wendigoon's pretty cool to watch, I must say. You're him, aren't you?
So I go to the link and it's me, which is really cool and it means a lot. And it's so wild to think that like the places I'm using for information are now like looking to me for information, which is so cool. But at the same time, that was where I was getting the information. So, but I do want to say it really means a lot how much this channel and series has grown thanks to you all. And I can't thank you enough. So it really does mean a lot. Anyway, back to the theories. Arizona Ghost Radio is in reference to a supposedly unmanned radio program that occurs in the desert around Phoenix, Arizona. What's odd about this program is no one can find the exact person who is mandating it or putting out the songs on it, and furthermore, all the songs put out are non-known sort of background records from popular bands. Also, there's no advertisements on the radio station, and the only indication of anything on it besides music is every couple hours there will be a loop that names itself as 103.1 KCDX. But other than that, no one knows who it is, and it seems to be just an empty radio station in the desert with no known source. Windshield pitting epidemic, or the Seattle windshield pitting epidemic, is in reference to a phenomenon that occurred in Seattle in 1954. Beginning in Seattle, people at the same time began to notice that their cars had small holes in the windshield. This was such...
I think I've heard about this one. This one's like a case of mass hysteria, I think someone like did a report of like kids were putting holes in people's windshield by throwing rocks at them. So everyone started noticing that there was cracks on their windshields. So people thought there was a massive epidemic. Like, why is everyone's windshields getting cracks in them? But I think it turned out that there was like, at the time, just having cracks in your windshield was just like common with the cars then. People just didn't notice them because they were like little cracks, but like, as soon as it became a thing that people knew about to look out for, everyone started noticing it. So it became like a mass hysteria thing, I think. I'm pretty sure that's what this is.
Such a problem that people within small neighborhoods began all reporting the same problem, and theories range from nuclear testing to sand flea eggs to hail falling from the sky. What was interesting was that no other windows on the car were damaged, nor the houses or any other piece of glass, just the windshields of people's cars. On top of that, this then spread from Seattle to down the coast, all the way into California. This became such an issue that Dwight D. Eisenhower, the then president, was even contacted over it in order to try to find some explanation for this. Police were called out on more than 15,000 calls for windshield damage, with a reported 3,000 of them being absolutely confirmed to be true. And while no one knows to this day exactly what happened, the primary theory behind it is that it was just a case of mass delusion. That one person heard that someone's windshield was damaged, so then they noticed their windshield being damaged. But was it at such a scale and people all over the country began to realize that, oh no, my windshield's got holes in it for some reason? I don't know, it's a weird one.
It's just weird.
To explain. North Korea ghost ships is in reference to the fact that every year off the coast of Japan, about a dozen ships that seem to be from North Korea wash up on the shore with either a dead crew or a completely missing crew.
That's weird.
Theories range from everything to alien abduction to sea monster attacks, but it's odd that all these ships keep leaving, are never accounted for, and then will one day just wash up on the shores of Japan with a completely dead
That's really creepy.
Inside. Also, not to tie in my own theories on this tier, but that's the exact same area that the bloop was heard from, so neo-dinosaurs.
Connecting the dots, man. Connecting the dots. I like that.
Is simply in reference to the fact that there are several new species of animals that have very strong similarities to extinct dinosaur species. This is either evidence that all dinosaurs didn't necessarily die out, they simply adapted, or the idea that some species thought to be extinct may be living somewhere else on Earth or somewhere else in Earth, as certain theories propose. Human hunting is exactly what it says. It is the fact that throughout history there have been cultures that have prided themselves on hunting humans for sport, everything from the Colosseum to ancient Aztecs. The theory goes a step forward and says that modern day elites are still doing it in their super secret areas and forests.
Some celebrity, okay, think about this. There's been so many celebrities that have been caught doing horrible shit, right? Like pedophilia and stuff, right? And just horrible shit. You're telling me there's not one celebrity that's been like a serial killer? Like, there's been celebrities that have murdered people, right? Like O.J. Simpson. Tell me there's not one celebrity that's a serial killer? There has to be at least one. There has to be at least one. Write down in the comment which celebrity you think is most likely to be a serial killer.
And things such as
not including the U.S. president, because that's too obvious.
As simply a form of blood sport or ritual sacrifice. Teeth implants at birth actually has two theories on it. One of which being that whenever you are born, doctors implant baby teeth into you in order to do something, I guess. Whereas the more common belief is at birth, doctors mess with your molar joints in order to cause wisdom teeth problems later in life, in order to create a triangle of money in which you have to pay to get wisdom teeth, from paying to be born in a hospital and blah blah blah, healthcare bad. But furthermore,
Healthcare
people
bad.
cite this as an explanation as to why not everyone needs their wisdom teeth removed. Stuxnet revival
Alright.
studies is in reference to the Stuxnet computer virus. The virus was used against Iran's nuclear weapon program in 2009, and although there's no direct evidence of it, it's believed that the virus itself was a joint operation between Israel and the United States. The virus essentially wiped out Iran's weapons program, but now that
Wow.
virus is out there, there are theories that specific groups of hackers or countries are trying to revive that virus in order to use it on separate world systems and potentially destroy an entire city's economy or
I wouldn't be surprised
infrastructure
at all.
using a line of code. Urine fasting is exactly what it says, that there are properties to urine that can be partaked
Nice.
of.
Nice.
And I don't want to talk about this anymore. Tsuzuki is in reference to the Tsuzuki procedure that popped up in 2017 on 4chan. In 2017, a user by the name of Tsuzuki popped up on 4chan and began telling people that they were giving away these sort of entry passes to escape the system space. According to them, we do not live in the correct reality, and every time that you die, you ascend one reality up if you follow a certain number of steps.
Ooh.
Tsuzuki was offering a way to the next step, and they considered what we were in now to be the system space. Therefore, if you do what Tsuzuki says, whenever you die, and without killing yourself, because that was stressed several times, you would then go up to the next tier. This is another one of those we live in a simulation, the world is not real theories that come from this specific user. Accelerationism is
I like that one. That's cool.
philosophy that goes off the idea that things are going to continuously work in cycles, so things will get worse before they get better, essentially, and that the best form of action, while we are capable, is to make things worse now so that we can hurry on to
and fix
the
it.
rebuilding process.
Right.
So essentially, if there is an economic system that is causing trouble in a country, the best thing to do is to accelerate that system as fast as you can and hurry up and get to the collapse so that you can work towards the rebuilding.
Make it
The
collapse.
Omphalos
Yeah, make it collapse faster so that we're gonna add. Yeah, make it collapse so the suffering doesn't last as long as you need to start the rebuilding. It makes sense. It makes
and work
sense.
towards the rebuilding. The Omphalos is believed by ancient Greeks to be the center of the world. According to legend, Zeus sent two hawks from either side of the world to fly towards the middle at equal speeds, and they met each other over Delphi, meaning that Delphi was the center of the world. According to legend, Zeus placed this rock, or the navel of the world as it was called, at the temple of Delphi, and the oracles then used it for ancient spells. Examining the rock now reveals that there are air passageways up the rock, meaning that it was most likely used to smoke stuff out of and receive spiritual
nice.
experiences. So, go figure. Sticking
Nice.
to the Greeks, Greek magnetic sky is in reference to the fact that most of the Greek architecture we see, such as temples and state houses, are all angled or sort of drifting in a way towards their magnetic field, and it lies in such a way that all of the stars and solar bodies can be seen from certain hilltops in Greece, implying that there was an extraordinary amount of astronomical architecture that went into these buildings.
There's a lot of that with like old ancient buildings, so it just don't make any sense, like how you were able to make something that specific.
Aliens. The theory is saying that's aliens because, of course, it is.
Aliens.
Quantum entanglement is a very sort of hard to understand concept. I'm going to do my best to explain it in an easy way. So if you'll remember how I mentioned quantum suicide in Tier 2 and how small particles react differently to things in the real world, quantum entanglement is in reference to the idea that when two of these microscopic particles come together, they sort of act as one particle. So therefore, things that are amassed together will begin acting as if they are one unit instead of several, and their quantum mechanics become entangled. So take that a step further and apply it to humans when it comes to things like string theory, and then you may realize that maybe you, the individual, are not the one that is acting in your own quantum field, but your own planet or your universe even is acting in its own sort of quantum direction. This is a step further in the thought concept that we do not have agency of ourselves and are instead subject to whatever others or even the universe does around us. Dr. Robert Morse became famous with his theories of veganism when it comes to correct diets and detoxing. However, what he is most known for is pioneering the idea of iridology, which is that you can look at someone's eyes and from the way that their eyes are formed and imperfections in it, tell everything from what diseases they have to what they are lacking in their nutritional diet. Currently, it's still considered a form of pseudoscience. However, there are people, including Robert Morse, who firmly believe that the secrets to the human body can be seen simply by looking into the eye. Ethnopsychiatry is exactly what it says. The idea that different ethnicities and cultures have different psychiatric effects in their brain and therefore need to be treated differently. However, you can apply this to a sort of historical view and say that the reason these different groups have different thought patterns is because of historical events that have occurred to them. This is very similar to the toxoplasmosis thing that I mentioned in whatever tier that was, where I said that this specific parasite has changed the course of human history. Well, take the parasite out of it and imagine that people have been changed over the course of history because of events that have happened to them, and therefore entire countries or ethnicities because of the psychological effects that have happened to them over time. Harmonic sync
actually makes a lot of sense,
to the fact that all sound waves give off a frequency, and that if two frequencies are matching each other, one can sort of become invisible under the other. This is both a concept when it comes to hidden messages and other weird MK Ultra experiments, but can also be used as a way to sort of manipulate the mind or even damage it, as I mentioned before in the Havana incident, where sound waves supposedly broke people's minds.
That one
could have been done
me out.
using this method. Report from Iron Mountain was a book that was published from the perspective of a panel of government agents who were giving secret information of government proceedings to the population. In the book, it said that it was determined by government higher-ups that in order to maintain power and peace, that there always needed to be a state of war, because using that or disease or some other form of terror, the government can continue to assert itself for control. Theories about this book range from everything to this is a very good take and sort of satirical look at how the government works,
that's how I would
to
look at that.
people who literally believe that it is an actual 15 group of government panelists who released this book against their higher-ups' wishes. USSR Never Collapsed is in reference to the idea that the supposed fall of the USSR in '91 at the end of the Cold War was instead just a ruse to divert attention away from the Red Scare. Evidence of this comes from the ideas that the US never verified that the USSR was gone, or that if you look at countries around the region at the time, there doesn't seem to be any change of government or celebration other than stuff that could be superficial. And furthermore, the US never deployed any troops or any stations in Russia, so it's sort of this idea that it was an understanding between countries in order to point attention somewhere else. Kundalini energy is a concept in Sanskrit mysticism.
That one's
Similar
interesting.
to ki energy and things like that from other Eastern philosophies, it's the idea that someone can embody this ethereal energy around them, but Kundalini energy goes a step forward and says that they can manifest it in their real world life in order to perform certain tasks or functions. So basically a sort of hidden power that the user can call upon. Brain in a jar, or brain in a vat, as
this one's a very interesting theory,
is the now sort of well-known idea that if you were to take a human brain out of the body,
you can just simulate reality. You have no idea that your brain is a
that
jar.
computer was a simulation of the real world. There is no possible way for that brain to figure out that it is not itself in a simulation. This relates back to the whole concept of I think, therefore I am, and that nothing can absolutely be known besides your own thought process, because everything could simply be a simulation. Universe People was a cult that originated in Europe in the 90s. This cult was sort of your standard ideas of UFO and crazy mysticism. It had ideas from biblical philosophy and Eastern philosophy, and simply explained that figures like Jesus were extraterrestrials throughout history. They faced a lot of scrutiny after the suicide of the Heaven's Gate cult in the United States and supposedly disbanded. However, there's theories that several influential people in European politics are secretly a member of this cult, and they are planning for some grandiose whatever cults do. The Umo case is one of the more well-known events when it comes to extraterrestrials. In the 1960s, 15 people around Spain began receiving these letters claiming to be that of alien life. According to these letters, they didn't want to make their presence known to man and simply had questions about how humans operate. These letters correctly identified several military events that were not known to the public that occurred in the decades leading up to these letters' messages, and even said that they found Earth because of signals being sent by a Norwegian tanker in 1934, which it was later proven had actually happened. According to the extraterrestrials, they were simply interested in how life worked on Earth and were very interested in concepts such as art, and after short correspondence with these 15 people, they all simply vanished. Segregated internet is in reference to the fact that there are obvious
how have I never heard that one before? What?
On the internet, depending on race or ethnicity and religion. However, the theory goes a step further and says that these are purposeful segregations given by the elites or higher ups in order to keep people segregated from each other and therefore continue to build up animosity towards each other so that people don't become a collective and look towards the real issues.
Another controlling thing.
The ones causing it. Symbiogenesis is a rather well-known concept in biology. As a matter of fact, it is the theory of how the mitochondria came to be, and it is the
powerhouse of the cell.
Certain biological organisms over time have began to adopt other biological organisms as part of their mainframe and continue to evolve with them. The reason for the mitochondria I mentioned earlier is because mitochondria always have a different DNA than the cell they're inside of, implying at one point that it was an entirely separate organism. This theory goes a step further and says it's happened with much more macro creatures, and even goes to say that perhaps the reason for human sudden evolution throughout our timeline of existence was because we began to absorb other creatures. So
absorb that life force,
yeah,
man.
That's a nice thought. The Antikythera mechanism is regarded as many as the first analog computer. Estimated to be made around 100 BC, it was a complex system of 36 bronze gears that turned in such a way that, from what we can tell now, was made to resemble the passage of the moon and even predict abnormalities in the moon, such as eclipses and things such as. What's interesting
and things such as. That's really interesting, though.
Much
what?
More advanced than anything else the Greeks had invented, with some even stating that the inside of it
aliens
looked like a clock. The Getty ruins are a series of ruins found on the coast of Kenya in the 1920s. What's interesting about these ruins is, while there's no exact history of who made them, it seems to be a massive trading station for the maritime people of the Somalia coast. However, there's no clear example of why these ruins became abandoned, especially considering that at the time that they would have been vacated, surrounding areas were much more impoverished than them, so it makes no sense as to why people would just leave the city empty. However, local tribes say that the ruins hold what they know as the Old Ones, or spirits of ancient priests who began to run off people and demanded that the city be kept for themselves. So to this day, it's sort of known as a haunted ruins that if you do approach, you must approach with caution. Theosophist geology comes from the idea of theosophism, which is very closely related to Gnosticism, which I'm going to have to make a deeper dive. I mentioned it like 12 times at this point. Theosophism is essentially a combination of several world religions, everything from Judaism to Nazism and everything in between, that says that truth and understanding are at the heart of every religion, and therefore there's something to be pulled out of every religion and hunt for the truth. Where this comes into geology is the idea that both rocks as they are found on Earth can hold these sort of secret meanings and hidden truths, and the idea of catastrophism, which is basically the idea that the world itself was formed through catastrophes, and that without catastrophes, true meaning cannot be known. It's sort of a really deep philosophy that's hard to explain in such a short amount of time.
I can kind of get what he's saying.
Basically, the idea that rocks hold hidden value, and from that we can find the true meaning of existence. Anatta is a concept from Buddhism, and says that there is no soul as we understand it or self of a person, and instead you yourself or anyone is the manifestation of the spirits or the world interacting around them. In other words, you yourself are not independent and your own creature. You are simply an amalgamation of the universe's energy around you. 40th Tithe was kind of hard to find any solid information on. The closest thing I could is the concept of teruma, which is a practice mentioned in Exodus in the Bible that's still carried out by several sort of more Jewish traditions. But it's the idea that the priest of whatever temple or system that you're under deserve 1/40th of your earnings to provide for themselves directly. Now, this has been used in a modern sense in much more nefarious ways.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
all the information I could find on it sort of hints at priests and pastors using this to sort of steal money from their people beyond
it
what
makes
they're
sense.
already giving. But essentially the concept that higher ups in religion are demanding a percentage of your wealth for them specifically instead of necessarily the work of God. Polywater was a
Right.
theory that was derived by Russian scientists in the 80s, and it's the idea that by running water through capillary tubes over and over, you can create a sort of mini water, which is just water compressed in the same space that one water molecule would normally be, creating a sort of thick, viscous type of water that both has a higher boiling point and lower freezing point, as well as containing more hydrogen and oxygen given its surface
So
area.
water on
While
steroids?
since this has been sort of proven as pseudoscience, the theory goes to say that Russia invented it as a sort of way to invigorate their troops because you could get the same sustenance out of water in a much smaller amount, meaning that preservations were easier to carry. Furthermore, it goes on to say that Russia has beat us scientifically in more ways than the US would like to think. HGP defunded is in reference to the Human Genome Project. From 1990 to 2003, a collaboration of the world's best scientists were put together in something called the Human Genome Project. The purpose of this was to determine the properties of the base pairs of DNA that all DNA was made up of, or basically the GCAT that pretty much everyone's familiar with now. While officially the HGP was ended in 2003 because it was simply complete, the theory says that they instead lost funding and research was made up in order to make the public think that everything went well, and a lot of our understanding about DNA base pairs is simply filler for what they were.
We got an ad. This one's confusing me, not gonna lie. I'm not quite understanding what he's getting at in
Unable
this
to
one.
accomplish. BDORT, or bidigital O-ring test, is a sort of alternative diagnosing method in which the patient puts their fingers together in an O-ring shape, and depending on what the best method is to pull it apart, the doctor can diagnose either their dietary downsides or what diseases they have. It's very similar to iridology, in which it is a very uncouth way of determining people's health problems through a sort of pseudoscience analysis. The cosmic butterfly and Rosalind Ballingall is in reference to an event that happened around the University of Cape Town in 1969. At the university, there was a rather well-known group of hippies or anti-war protesters known as the Cosmic Butterfly. From all the research I could find, they were your standard, free love, anti-war peace movement. Nearby, the majority of them lived at a place known as the Sugar House Commune. One of these was a girl from the UK known as Rosalind Ballingall. One day, according to witnesses, she got a Bible which she took on a walk into the woods and was never seen again. Now, there are several weird sort of events surrounding this. For example, why would she, being as anti-religious as the group was known to be, take a Bible with her on a walk into the woods? Furthermore, whenever the family has been tried to be contacted about this event, they refuse to speak on it, as well as local police, who also, I should mention, have lost the police report since it's happened. Also,
anytime the police lose evidence or lose the police report, bro, I'm hella suspicious.
stories about the day specifically get kind of odd. For example, Rosalind's friends, who supposedly passed her on the way, said that she was staring off in the distance in a sort of trance and just continued walking. Also, her boyfriend, who was the only person who did not help in the search and rescue party, simply sat back at the front steps of their house and played the flute as everyone else looked for her. I should also mention the garden that she walked into is known as the Garden of Eden, and is famous for several occult practicing and rituals that have occurred there. Since then, there have been several reports that as people drive through the area, they see a girl matching Rosalind's description in the back seat of their car, and even stories of children freaking out, saying that there's someone sitting in the back seat with them. Theory says
this one's really
Rosalind
creepy.
was under the influence of a cult and used as a sort of sacrifice, and now her spirit haunts the woods of the Garden of Eden. And that is it for tier 5. And I just
Alright, that was a great ending, because that one was really weird and no explanation. I don't have any explanation for that one other than something to do with a cult, probably. Alright, so that's it for tier 5. Make sure to subscribe and like. If you just watch an hour-long video of me watching this, bro, and you don't even subscribe and like. What are you doing with your life, bro? What are you doing? You just watch an hour-long video. You need to subscribe and like, bro. What's wrong with you? Yeah. Make sure to subscribe, and we're also going to be continuing the series. Part 6 will be coming out next week, so get prepared for that. And yeah, make sure to watch all the other videos, and bye.